there's like this huge campaign, like one of the biggest deals of my life at the time. And I remember I was like really torn on whether or not I should take it because it was super, super close to my sister's wedding. Mm-hmm. And like I have only one sister and I was like the maid of honor. So I was like, okay, whatever I do, I cannot miss that. I was scheduled to get back from that event like the day before like the pre-wedding events. So I was like, okay, I can probably just make it in time. But I think when I was deciding on whether or not to take the deal, I was like really, really going back and forth because I was just like, there's like, am I going to be judged by my family by taking on this deal when it's like so close to like the wedding or like so close to that? Like, is it selfish for me to do that?
Welcome to B&H Creators Green Room. And just like a real green room, we're here to spill the tea with some of our favorite creators. I'm so excited because today I have a very special guest, a premier video editor, a content creator queen who not only makes viral content on the regular, but really creates episodic series that people are interested in. I would say she's pretty much the internet's best friend. And hopefully after this conversation, my best friend too. So hi, Mylene Mae. How are you? And thanks for joining.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here, even though virtually. But yeah, it's been good in my world. Currently based in Toronto, weather's still sunny and bright. It's not going to be like that soon.
Well, this will probably air like later in the winter too. So I'm hoping you have a long fall and it's still sunny when this actually comes out. But that's nice to hear. So tell me everything. I'm sure like a lot of like listeners and viewers know your content. I think you always pop up on my For You feed, maybe because I'm like definitely like an editor girly at heart too. So it's definitely like resonating with me. But how did this start? Because I know you've had a unique journey and you've only been doing it like 2 years. So like how did this unfold?
Yeah, so it has been a bit of an interesting journey. I think I like to call myself a bit of an accidental creator in a sense. So like past lore life, I was actually like, I've never dreamed to be a content creator. I always watched creators growing up, but for me, I was very much so on the typical like STEM engineering path. So studied engineering throughout university and thought that my job was going to follow in that path of just like working in the tech industry, working in startups, because that was what I was really, really into at the time. Graduated in 2023. And at the time, the tech market wasn't doing so hot. And I didn't really want to hop into a job right away because I was kind of just like, I don't really know what I'm passionate about yet. And I think it's a good time for me to just explore because obviously with engineering, like it was always just like grinding. And so I was like, okay, I'll just like relax, take some time. I got rejected from what I thought was my dream tech job at the time. And that week, I got an email from this one startup founder. And he was like, hey, we're running this program in SF and it's going to be 3 months. You can work on your ideas full time and just see what happens. And so I was like, cool, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. So I moved to SF for 3 months. And at the time I was making coding videos because I really wanted to get better at programming. And so I was posting one YouTube video every week just to keep myself accountable. That was like the first time that I picked up a camera, first time that I started learning how to edit. And by the end of the 3 months, I was like, you know what? Actually, don't like the coding thing. I think I'm just going to focus on video. So I ended up doubling down more on video stuff, got really burnt out with the YouTube stuff. And a friend was like, hey, why don't you try short form? So I essentially started doing stuff on Instagram, just like experimenting, trying a bunch of really, really random things that don't look like my content now. And eventually I figured out what kind of stuck with me. But I'll stop there because I feel like there's like so much lore that I could dig into, but I'll pause there.
Oh my God, no, this is like incredibly fascinating though. I mean, have you always been creative? And like, how hard was it to just learn video editing from scratch, like on your own?
Yeah, so I'd say I always had an artistic side to me in a sense that like as a kid, I was always drawing, painting. Like my first ever YouTube channel, which a lot of people don't know this, was like way back when I was in grade 7 or 8. And I was making polymer clay tutorials. Like there was like a whole niche on the internet. Like Conan Gray was also on this niche of the internet before he became like this big music artist. But yeah, that was kind of like my first dip of creating. And then I kind of like stopped all of that. So I guess when I formally started learning editing 2 years ago, I'm someone who, I don't know, I just can't really sit through a long course or a tutorial. I know obviously YouTube University is great, but for me, I get really distracted easily. So the best way that I found for me to learn from scratch was actually just looking at the things that I really enjoyed and going into the video editor and just like trying. to bring whatever I had in my head to life. Because I think the thing about tutorials and like courses is, for me at least, if you have all the tools, it's really hard to then understand how to apply them. So if you start with like thinking about a project or what you want to create first, it kind of forces you to learn the specific tools to get that thing done, versus like, it's kind of like the equivalent of like if you're a chef and you have like all these different pots and pans, you can have like the nicest knives and the nicest like gear, but if you don't know how to use them, then you'll just kind of be sitting with all of those tools, versus like if you're like, hey, I really want to make this really sick lasagna, then it's like, okay, you know, to get this item and you know to get that, and kind of work backwards from there.
Oh, so smart, like a puzzle almost. And so do you remember like the first major thing you were editing, I guess in this 2-year span, not the claymation stuff, which is very cool though. And like, was there one big challenge where you were like, I'm going to learn how to, I love like how you do text overlays and you play with like 3D, and like there's so much just nuance to your edit style. So was there something that you were like a little more challenging, I guess?
Yeah, I think when I think back to the early days of my content, the first thing that really pushed me to explore more of the cinematic side of things was probably this video that I made called Letters from a Stranger. So it's still on my YouTube now, even though mainly like the stuff that I do right now is short form. But it was basically based on one of the coding projects that I had made earlier that year, where I basically made this website where people could submit anonymous letters, like letters to themselves or like letters to other people. And so what I did was I would get people off the street. So I would have other strangers reading those letters, and I tried to like frame it really nicely. That was probably like one of the biggest video projects that I had worked on in the beginning that really kind of, I guess, snowballed that creative spark. But then aside from that long form project, I think the main thing for me was my first ever series, which was the one that blew up my account, which was the 23 lessons from 2023. So going into that series, I was like, okay, I'm just going to try a bunch of different angles. I'm going to try to have fun with like the storytelling and the shot list and just like all these different variables and see what happens. So I think that was probably the thing that pushed me to grow the most, both like personally from a technical standpoint, but then also it just so happened like from an account growth standpoint, it's also what snowballed, I guess, where I am now.
Okay, and let's talk about like the episodic side of things, because I love that series, and I feel like a lot of creators have leaned away from episodic content, like especially after post-TikTok, post-pandemic. There's been a lot of one-offs and following trends, but it is so important, I think, to build community if they know what to expect from you. So I think episodic content is so important. So do you find that it's a struggle to, I guess, not lean toward trends, or what are you finding when you look at the metrics?
Yeah. So I actually try not to look at the metrics a lot, just because there was a point in time in the beginning when my account hadn't even blown up, where I was so focused on the metrics when they didn't even matter. I think in the beginning, the most important thing is how can you just keep the process of creating fun and push yourself to like stay curious, because that'll keep you consistent enough to actually, you know, find the right people who will resonate with your content. So I think for me in the beginning, yeah, it was less so focusing on the metrics. It was more so focusing on how can I keep creating fun. But I think the thing about chasing trends is that if you are chasing the viral trends, you're kind of always like following behind someone else. You're kind of like taking something existing, and sure, you're probably tweaking it to make it your own, but you're always going to find yourself chasing the next thing. Versus I think with episodic stuff and like series-based content in general, you have full control over the narrative. And because it's a fixed duration of like, okay, 10 episodes or 20 episodes, you can at least commit to that number of videos before like moving on to the next thing. Because I think the thing about content creation is, you know, trends and your own interests as a creator change so quickly. So it's like, okay, as long as I can commit to like 5 videos, 10 videos, then once that series is done, like, sure, I can go explore a bunch of other things. But at least for that 10, I'll commit to this specific narrative or this specific idea. And I think that gives you enough reps to be able to understand what you like, but then also what could be resonating with your audience.
Right. And do you read the comments? Do you find that, like, do you take inspiration from the community?
Yeah, I definitely do read comments. I think it's always nice to hear what people are saying, just because it kind of does give you a bit of an insight into, are people receiving the message the way that I intended it? It's kind of like, okay, am I closing the gap between what I wanted the intention of the video to be and how people are now perceiving it? And so by reading the comments, it does make me like take a mental note of like, okay, is this actually resonating with people in the way that I wanted it to? And then if it's not, why is that the case? Is there something that I can explain better? Is there something that I could showcase more? Or even like visual techniques, like if people like the fonts that I use or they like the way that I edit, what kind of tips or advice could I also share for my community in a future video?
Now, a lot of our listeners and viewers are like new creators or kind of just starting on their journey. Have there been lessons you've learned kind of along the way in the last 2 years that you wish maybe your earlier content creator self would have known?
Yeah, definitely a lot of them. But I think, yeah, the biggest thing would probably be, and it sounds like very mundane, and I always say this in like any type of, talk or presentation, is just keep creating fun as long as possible. I think, again, the more that you fixate on the metrics, the more it kind of clouds the joy of actually putting stuff out there. I think in the beginning, a lot of content creators wonder, is it better to focus on quantity or quality? Should I be putting out more content? Should I be putting out content every day? Or should I put out one video a month, but it's like really high quality? And I think some of the advice that I got early on, which I do think has stuck with me to this day, is in the beginning days when you're first exploring the creative career path or just like creating in general, is really important to focus on quantity, just like getting the reps and getting things out there. Because if you can nail like that routine or get into the habit of creating, then you can always add on the quality later. But if you can't even get into like the mindset of creating consistently, then you're always going to be held back by perfectionism, and you're going to output a lot less than you want to. And it kind of feeds into this like negative loop of like, oh, why am I not creating enough? Or could I be doing more? Versus early on, if you just get the reps out, then you kind of start to let go of that perfectionism and you get real-time feedback, which helps you iterate and kind of make better content moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's so true because like I'm definitely one of those people, like if it's not perfect, I want to wait until I'm like so happy with it before it like goes live. And I do feel like I get in my own way, and there's so many creators who that probably resonates with. How did you overcome that? And also, I think it's your tech background too, like because you're very analytical, even like, I mean, very pragmatic too, but like even in the way you're articulating all of this and kind of explaining, it does feel like you're leaning into that side of your brain. So is that like a secret superpower?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that was the one thing that I am really grateful for. I think when I tell a lot of people that I came from a tech background, it can be a bit surprising, since I think a lot of people who I've met in my niche have like film background or like marketing background. And so it's interesting to hear like this one person who is like deep in the startup and like, I don't know, like tech world. But I think, so there's something in software where it's like sprints or like cycles and things like that of like how they develop a product. And I think in a way, I kind of look at my content in that sense where it's like, okay, you have like an initial planning phase and then you'll ship something really quickly. And then from there, you'll iterate after that. So I think that's kind of like one slight mindset that I've adapted from the tech world. But I think funnily enough, if anything, there's like, in terms of how I operate, it's shifted like almost 180 degrees since when I was working in the tech world. I think things were very rigid and very like metrics focused in the tech world, where it's like you always had KPIs or you always had like certain metrics that you wanted to hit, and everything was like measured in a certain way. And so I think that now I've like leaned more into the creative side, where in a way, me doing things like completely opposite to how I was doing them in the tech world feels very liberating and free. And I feel like that's allowed me to go down rabbit holes that I wouldn't have really explored. Like this is the first year that I decided I wasn't going to set typical goals. I was just going to set like themes or intentions and then let that snowball and unfold however it wanted to. Because the thing about goals is like you're working towards an end point, but a lot of the time you don't actually know what you want that end point to look like. Like so much can change in the span of a month or 2 months or a year that like if you set an end goal, it might actually be limiting you. So that's kind of why I've like shifted away from the typical tech mindset. But I still do adapt like certain ways of thinking to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your intentions this year?
Yeah. So the intentions that I had this year are very, very high level. Like the first one, which both of these are more personal. First one is like to be the most kind version of myself, both like to the people around me and to myself. I think especially when like you work alone, you can be your own harshest critic when it comes to, oh, am I doing enough? Or should I be, creating more or whatever it may be. And so I think just like being kinder and like giving myself more grace for just how much has changed in the past 2 years, like even with like the growth of my account and like literally like I think 2024, like on a little side tangent, was probably the craziest year of my life in terms of like I literally changed every aspect of my life. Like I moved cities, I quit my job. So like I completely pivoted my career, started like rekindling my relationship with my parents, got out of a really long-term relationship. So like every single aspect of my life changed. But anyways, I digress.
No, that's fascinating because, like, honestly, I feel like you need those big chapters. You know what I mean? Like to set you up for the next kind of section of chapters. So that makes sense that you had like a rebirth in a way.
Yeah.
And then that led
like
to
big shift.
And I guess, how do people set intentions? Like if I'm a new creator, I would probably get bogged down, not by metrics, but even just by like growth goals or things that are very analytical in that sense. Like I want my first brand deal, or I want this, or I want that. How do you get out of your own way?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good question. Because I do think that the main thing that holds people back is their own mindset to things. I think the first thing is just realizing, where does the need for those things come from? Like the need to have more followers or the need to have more views. Where does that come from a place of? And I think just being very brutally honest for yourself, because I too was like a big badge collector where I was like, oh, I need this like accolade, or like, oh, I need this award, or this like, certificate, or like this stamp of approval. And I think for me, at least, like speaking for myself, being very brutally honest for myself, it's like, okay, am I doing this for other people or am I doing it for myself? And so I think if you really sit down and think about what is your goal for creating outside of, the visual or like the external, like aspects of it, I think that really helps you find what the intrinsic motivation is. So I think for me, like when I started creating again, I didn't think that I wanted to be a content creator. It just kind of happened because I realized, okay, the impact that I want to have is to inspire other people to also take bets on themselves, to also take these risks towards the things that they care about. And that came from a place of me proving that to myself, because I always was like following in a path that was kind of defined for me. So breaking away from that, I was like, if I can do it, other people can do it too. So if I live by example, if I tell the stories, share the lessons that I've learned from that path, maybe other people will also hopefully resonate and feel less alone in that. And so I think for me, that was like my intention when it came to putting stuff out there, is just capturing that journey. And so I think for other people, it's the same thing, where if you really think about what is the message that you want to send out there, what is the takeaway that, or like the impact that you want to have on the world, I think that really helps you think more high level, and keeps you going even when like the metrics are down or you're not getting any views. Because either way, you still just want to put that message out there.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Because like I think some creators, not all of them, but I think the early career ones maybe are feeling like, I'm doing this because I want this lifestyle, or I want this like gold plaque from YouTube, or I want, this accolade or something. Like that's the driving force. And like, I think being authentic and figuring out like, but what's your story? I like all the creators that we've had on the pod so far have had that in common, where it really is so much more high level than that. They've really found like the why that drives them. And I feel like that's what people need to tap into a little more. Or maybe everyone is on some level tapped into it, but that's not the perception of like what a creator is. So I love that we're having these conversations, and people that maybe don't know how hard it is to be a creator, or like why people are creators, now kind of understand that background a little more. I think that's like really special. And I feel like that will help build the community amongst creators too, to kind of find that niche amongst each other, or like that, support system, because it can be also very siloing to be alone making all your content. Yeah. I know you do a ton of brand work too. So how do you juggle the content that you're making that goes toward that larger purpose, and then also like the business side of things? Because at the end of the day, like, you do want it to be a prosperous business. How do you juggle that dichotomy of those two aspects of it?
That's a good question, because I think for a long time, and still to some degree today, I was always the type of person where I was very like not turned off by the money side of things, but the money side frustrated me because I always was like, okay, you either have to choose like, oh, I'm going to make a lot of money, or oh, I'm going to have a big impact. Because I think a lot of the stories that you see in the media are like, oh, this like creator or this founder made like $1 billion company. And so you see all like the glitz and glam of that, and it makes you think like, oh, should I be doing that as well? Or like, oh, those people like maybe aren't doing something to like save the world, but it's like, oh, they're like very, very money focused. And so I think my perception was very, oh, I need to like trade off one or the other. But I think the older that I've gotten and the more that I've like dove deeper into this self-employed world, I realized that the two go hand in hand, where as a creator or as an entrepreneur, whatever you may be, in order to have that impact or to bring your message or whatever you want to fruition, you do need to be able to support yourself. You do need to be a little bit selfish at times. And I don't even think that's being selfish. It's just like making sure that you have like food on the table and like the ability to pay rent and stuff like that. So I think that to me, the two go hand in hand. I try not to think of them too separately. So for example, when I do brand deals and sponsorships and things like that, I always make sure that the message is something that is like relatable to the content that I already create. So if the brand is not something that I actually genuinely love or use, then I probably would not take on that deal. I always try to make sure that it has some kind of narrative that ties into what I already create. And I think that's just like also authentic to my audience as well, because I don't want to be like recommending them or like, promoting something that I don't actually believe in or use. So I think for me, it's just being very intentional about the campaigns that I take on, because I've already built up this trust with my audience. I wouldn't want to tarnish that in any type of way. So
yeah, we all remember the tummy time saga of social media where it went on and everyone was just doing whatever deal they got. And I think those creators learned a hard lesson. And I love that the new batch of creators have really found more authenticity, right, around that. So are there things that in a deal you look for, or are there tips that you've learned along the way for creators kind of like going into that? Like maybe they have a brand now that's reached out that they feel in line with. How do they navigate that if they're new at that? And obviously, I know at this stage you have like a management company behind you and a support system, but a lot of people are still doing the one-man band style. Are there things that they should be on the lookout for, or recommendations?
Yeah. I guess one recommendation that I have, or like one thing that I like to do when I think about brand deals or like which ones to take on, is even if it's a product that I haven't necessarily used before, if it's something that I'm curious about or will push me towards another goal, then, or like some kind of like skill, I'll do that. So for example, last year I wasn't really into using like Photoshop or things like that. But when Adobe had reached out, I was like, you know what, this is a really great way to learn a new skill and try out like a new creative part of my brain. Like I had just moved into my apartment at the time and I was like, whoa, I could like totally make posters for my apartment. So like completely unrelated to like the video content that I make, but it's like, oh, it's going to allow me to learn this new skill and like contribute to my life in other ways outside of like the content itself. Or for example, like I did a partnership this year with Stan Store. It had been a kind of idea in my head for a while that I wanted to create this handbook or this guide on how to make series-based content, because a lot of my audience had asked for that. But I just never dedicated the time to actually doing it and like making the handbook and making the guide. So when that partnership came up, it was a really good opportunity for me to like tackle that personal like project that I wanted to do, while also again tying that to something that was authentic to the brand. So I think if you can think about things that you want to do, and then either like pitch yourself to that brand and be like, hey, this could be like a really cool campaign or a really cool idea. I think that is probably what usually works the best in terms of like, one, making sure that you're doing something that you care about and resonates with you, and then two, something that is like genuinely going to showcase the brand in a positive light.
Yeah, it has to be like that partnership. Totally. Totally. Okay, so we're going to play a little game. We do this with all of our guests now. We've asked our previous guest a question for you. They didn't know who you were yet, so it was a surprise. And then we will kind of hot potato it, and you will ask the next guest a question as well. So we had Tolu Akundare on last week from Netflix's Perfect Match, and she's just a podcaster and creator in her own right. And her question was, what is the hardest part about being a creator that people don't necessarily always see? And how have you navigated that?
Ooh, that's a good question. Oh, that's a deep one. So I think something, and this doesn't even apply to just being a creator, but just like being self-employed in general, is I think people don't talk about some of the, I don't know if sacrifices is the right word, but I guess some of the downsides that come with self-employment where, for example, I remember last year, this is like a bit of a tangent now, but
Please.
I remember last year I had this like really amazing work opportunity come up. A brand was going to fly me out, and there's like this huge campaign, like one of the biggest deals of my life at the time. And I remember I was like really torn on whether or not I should take it because it also coincided with like Canadian Thanksgiving, but then it also was super, super close to my sister's wedding. And like I have only one sister, and I was like the maid of honor. So I was like, okay, whatever I do, I cannot miss that. I was scheduled to get back from that event like the day before like the pre-wedding events. So I was like, okay, I can probably just make it in time. But I think when I was deciding on whether or not to take the deal, I was like really, really going back and forth because I was just like, there's like, am I going to be judged by my family by taking on this deal when it's like so close to like the wedding or like so close to that? Like, is it selfish for me to do that? And so I think a lot of the times as a self-employed person, you can feel a bit of that guilt or that like selfishness, even though if you think about it, like if I was working a 9 to 5, and my boss was like, you have to go to this conference. You have to go here for a work opportunity. Or like, oh, you have to work overtime. You can't say no. And so I think when you're your own boss, it all hits a bit harder because you're the one who's actively making the decision. And so I think people don't really talk about the weight that kind of has on like your own decision making and how, yeah, there is like that weird separation sometimes of like trying to think of things from like a personal standpoint, but then also a professional standpoint, and realizing that like, hey, just because you operate your own schedule, you work your own hours, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily free all the time. I think oftentimes like as a creator, sometimes people think that like my free time also means that I'm like available. But I think, just because you have that flexibility doesn't mean that you can't, keep certain boundaries for yourself. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I've had to overcome. And I think the way that I've overcome that is just like, one, being more clear with my boundaries and like also just prioritizing the things that matter to me. So like making sure that the people who I'm closest with feel still, again, very connected and close to me. And I'm not just like shutting out those parts of my life. So kind of trying to like maintain that balance. But yeah, long-winded answer.
No, I feel like that's so relatable for everyone. Like I do have a 9 to 5, and that's still like something that people are constantly like actively working on to try to keep better boundaries and also to remember what's really important in life. But it seems like you're doing a great job. So I hope you're proud of yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And do you have a question for our next guest?
I do. Okay. So a big theme in my life is side quests. Like I call myself a professional side quester in a sense that like me doing this whole content creation thing now started off as a side quest and then it has now become the main quest. So like I think the question that I have for the next guest is what is the next side quest that you are most excited about? And if you haven't started it already, why have you not started that side quest yet? So for example, like one of the side quests that I'm on right now is learning how to dance because I've been trying to learn how to dance like hip hop dance for such a long time, but I've never actually put action towards it. But yeah, this year I started figuring that out as a side quest and actually going to dance classes.
I did see that already on your Instagram.
So
that's great. No, you're doing great. You're killing it. That's great because I was going to say what side quests you have coming up. But yeah, dance is a great one. And also another way to just, I think, be grounded and like in your body and not such, not another one that you're monetizing either. I think a lot of people tend to make the side quest then another hustle.
Yeah.
And then you burn out. So find that joy. I love that. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mylene. Where can people find you if they're not already following you?
Yeah, so all of my handles are just Mylene's Mind. So Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, mainly post on Instagram. But yeah, it's just Mylene's Mind.
Perfect. And then everyone listening, thank you for joining us yet again. And please follow B&H accounts on bh.creators on Instagram and BH Creators on TikTok. Until the next one, thank you so much. It's been such an honor.
Thank you.